Next up, we're going to talk about using ChatGPT to help write code, debug code, and improve code. And I'm just going to give you the lay of the land here. There's two sections. This first section is all about the brand new ChatGPT code interpreter. It was released literally yesterday, and it allows you to ask ChatGPT not just to write code for us, but it will actually execute Python code within the browser without us having to even fully understand how to code. So the code interpreter is great both for existing developers and coders who are comfortable writing Python, but also for relative beginners. You might run into issues. It certainly won't be able to solve everything for you, but it will be able to get you some basic working code and things that work and run in the browser without you having to be a developer. The second section here, following this one, will be about using plain old regular ChatGPT to help you write code, which is incredibly useful still. There are quite a few limitations to the code interpreter feature, but by using regular plain old ChatGPT, what we've been using so far in the course, you can ask it to help you write code, debug code, improve your code. It just won't run it for you within the ChatGPT experience. But if you're making a web application or a game or something large, it wouldn't work for ChatGPT to run it anyway. Those are things that we need to create a bunch of files for and have databases. So there's still a lot of utility to knowing how to prompt plain old regular ChatGPT to write code for you. So that's the lay of the land. We start in this section with the code interpreter that is brand new, very exciting. It's honestly pretty cool in some situations. Like I said, it has limitations. It runs code right in ChatGPT. And then following this, we'll learn more about just prompting code-related prompts to regular ChatGPT. So if you are a developer, both sections will be worth watching. And if you're new to coding, this section specifically will probably have more useful features for you. Okay, so in the next video, we'll talk about the code interpreter. Okay, so let's get started by learning more about the brand new code interpreter feature in ChatGPT. Like most of the beta features, and it currently is a beta feature, you have to start by enabling it, by turning it on in your settings. Currently, if I go to my ChatGPT, it is turned on. If I go to GPT-4, I'll see code interpreter here, but the odds are that you won't see that because you have to enable it. So if you go down to the settings icon or the settings button here, or I guess the triple dots, and then go to settings, go to beta features, just like we turned on plugins, we can turn on code interpreter. Now this is limited only currently to ChatGPT Plus users who subscribe. So I will toggle that on. It was already on, but just to show you that. And now you should have access to the code interpreter under GPT-4 if you subscribe to ChatGPT Plus. Okay, so I've started a new code interpreter chat, and let's talk about what it is. What exactly is this new feature? So ChatGPT for a long time has been able to write code for you, and you can then copy that code and run it yourself locally on your machine. With the new code interpreter, it can run a specific subset of code directly within your chat session and show you the output. So specifically, it only works with Python at the moment. And then even within Python, there's certain things that it won't do. But let's start by just asking it, can you explain what the ChatGPT code interpreter does? Interpreter does, or how it works. So it says, in this platform, OpenAI has paired the language model with a Python execution environment. When you provide a piece of Python code, the language model sends that code to the Python environment to be executed. The actual execution is done by the Python interpreter, and the result is then returned to you, which displays it to you. Again, this only works with Python. So if you don't know Python, it's still not the end of the road because there's a lot you can ask it to do without even understanding code. But we can do something super simple like, what is the result of the following Python code? And then I'll just do some simple Python code in here. Okay, like I said, extremely simple. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to code, but I'm giving it what's called a variable set to I love apples. Apple are my favorite fruit. And then I'm asking it to, I'll just do it like this, count how many times apple occurs. This is specific Python code, and it will execute my code. It gives me an explanation here, and it says, in this case, apple appears twice in that string. which is correct. That's what we would get back if we ran this ourselves, and we wouldn't get a paragraph explaining it. We would just get the number 2. But normally, if we provide Python code to ChatGPT, it might be able to, in a simple case, figure out what it does, but it's not actually going to run it itself. It won't truly evaluate the Python code. It might be able to guess what it does. It can write us code, but it can't run it. So let me show you another example. Something a lot of people use Python for is data analysis and data visualization. So in the next video, we'll actually use an example data set. We'll upload some information and ask ChatGPT to generate us all sorts of charts and scatter plots and things like that. But let's start with a super simple diagram or plot. I'll ask it to generate me a plot of the, what should we do? I don't know, x squared. I want to see just an exponential graph. And here we are. Here's a plot of the function y equals x squared. The x values range from -10 to 10. The plot is a parabola, right? So we start at 0, and then as x goes up, of course, this goes up exponentially. Y goes up exponentially. So if we look at what it actually did, we can click on Show Work. And this shows us the underlying Python code. So if you are a developer, you want to tweak something, you can take this code, try changing it yourself. Try doing it locally in a notebook or in just your text editor and execute it as Python. If you're not a developer, you can still look at the code and try and understand what's happening. And then I can ask it to do things like only start with a positive value for x. So how about remake the graph, but limit the x-axis to go from 0 to, I don't know, 7. We'll just be very specific. And now it's not just going to show me a new image. It actually writes the code. It's Python code. Then it evaluates the Python code. It actually executes it. Then it shows me, it renders the result. And now it only goes from 0 to 7. And we can see our work here. It's using something called NumPy. Again, not a big deal if you're not familiar with Python, but it's using matplotlib and NumPy here. And then it generates me this, and I can ask it to change the label. So I can do, whatever I want. I'll just end with one more example. Change the plot title to my first graph. And then it changes the code. And you can see right here, it sets the plot.title using the matplotlib method called title to my first graph. And now my graph has that title, my first graph. And there's tons of things I could ask it to do just with this one plot. I could have it change the color, change the line style, change the labels and the axes. Not to mention what I'll show you in the next video, where we can have it generate all sorts of plots and data analysis on a real world data set, not just, y equals x squared. Anyway, this is our first example of something that we can only do within the code interpreter chat session. I could ask regular ChatGPT, write me the Python code to generate a graph showing y equals x squared. It will give me the code, and then I have to take it, copy it, run it on my machine locally. Here, it does it for me all behind the scenes. It writes the Python code, runs it, and then shows me the result. What makes the code interpreter chat so special and also very useful is this little upload button right here. We can upload pretty much any sort of file, assuming it's under, I believe, 500 megabytes is the current threshold. We can upload a data set, a CSV file, an Excel spreadsheet, a JSON file, SQL stuff, images, and then we can have the code interpreter do some work, do some data analysis, data visualization. And that's exactly what we'll start with in this video. So the first thing we need to do is find a data set that we can use. Now, in the real world, you might have some company data, some personal sales data, whatever it is, your fitness data, I don't know, something from a Fitbit, whatever the data set is, you can upload it. I have to contend with Creative Commons licensed data sets that are available for me to use in this course. Fortunately, the website Kaggle, Kaggle, has tons and tons of data sets. That's really what the website exists to do, is provide data sets, also host competitions, discussions, and have people share their analysis of different data sets. So if you go to Kaggle, you'll need to create an account. It's free. We can go to datasets, and then I'm going to filter by Creative Commons licensed datasets so I can use them in this course. And there's tons of different datasets, and you can sort them. You can search if you want the most updated, the most popular, the newest. I'm going to go with a simple and easy to understand dataset to begin with. Some of them are quite complicated and they exist across multiple files. I'm going to go with this one, which is IMDb Top 1000 Movies. So this dataset includes information just about the top 1,000 movies on the Internet Movie Database, IMDb. And if we scroll down, we get a preview of what the data looks like. So the different columns. So there's an ID, the title of the movie, like The Shawshank Redemption, the director, the release year, the runtime in minutes, the genre, the rating. So this is the IMDb rating. Then we have the Metascore, which is an aggregate of critic ratings. So there's sometimes a difference where something might be critically loved and the audience score might be lower or vice versa. And that's something we could explore using ChatGPT. And then we have the total gross of the movie. Now we don't have the budget, which there could be some interesting things to do with budget, but we have the gross, which is in millions, I believe. Although there's a lot of zeros because lots of these movies don't have budget or don't have gross information. So that's also something we'll have to contend with. And we can ask ChatGPT to help us ignore the rows that have zero, for example. Anyway, I'm going to do this in such a way that you don't really have to understand anything about working with Python, working with data, pandas, matplotlib, any of that stuff, and we'll still be able to perform some basic data analysis and visualization. The first step is to download this dataset, and it's a small one, 66 kilobytes. Great. We're within the 500 megabyte threshold by quite a ways. So I'm going to download that and unzip it, and then I'm going to go back to ChatGPT in a code interpreter session where I have this upload file button, and I'm going to navigate to the folder I just unzipped. And there's two versions in here. There's a clean and raw file. I'm going to go with the clean file. That just means the data likely has been cleaned up and has less errors. And then I'll upload this. And when it finishes, all right, it's almost done. I can either just hit enter right away, or I can provide some instructions. If I just hit enter, ChatGPT will tell me something like, okay, you uploaded a file, here's the name. What do you want me to do with it? Do you want to preview the data? Do you have a specific task? I'll just start with, tell me a bit about the data. And it should tell me a little bit about the different columns. It's a CSV file, which is a comma-separated value file. And it says that here are the columns. We've got an unnamed column, which is some sort of ID or index column. So it's telling me this might cause some confusion. Then we have the title, director, release year, runtime, genre, rating, Metascore, and gross in millions. So it already figured out a little bit about the structure of the data. I could do simple questions like, how many movies are in the data set? And by the way, as always, I can click under Show Work to see the work that it did. It's using a library called Pandas, very popular for data analysis, manipulation within Python. It loads the CSV file, and then it calls a method called head, which just returns the first couple rows of the data set. And we can see the output here. Again, you don't really have to know Python in order to use it. Here it's telling me there's 994 unique movies in the data set. Okay. Now let's try doing something like, let's perform some basic data analysis. And let's play dumb and say, I don't have any ideas. Can you suggest some ideas? And it will give me a list of possible things that we could try with the data. So basic statistics around runtime, rating, Metascore, gross, understand the distribution of genres, identify directors with the most movies in the data set, analyze the number of movies released each year, find correlations between a movie's rating and its gross earnings, find the top 10 highest rated movies, top grossing movies, all of that. So why don't we try something simple like identify the directors with the most movies in the dataset? Simple enough. Okay, so it's written some code. Pretty simple pandas code if you're at all familiar with pandas. Basically, you're just going to run a method called value counts on the director column. And this will generate a series showing the director name followed by how many movies they were in. And, oh, there's an error. What happened? This happens occasionally here. One thing that is a little bit annoying with the code interpreter is that if you step away from the computer for too long, or you open a new window of ChatGPT and you try and come back to this session, you have to reload everything from scratch. You have to re-upload the file in most cases. So it's something that can take a long time. Anyway, here we go. It worked this time. So here's the code that it runs. Here's the underlying result it gets from Python. So if you were just to run this code yourself, which you totally could if you know Python, you understand pandas, you know how to import pandas, how to find a CSV file, all of that stuff, you could run this, and this is the result you get. Then ChatGPT steps in and it pretties it up a little bit, right? It turns it into a more English format where it's printing it out, right? It's adding movies at the end, but the numbers are the same. We have Hitchcock 32. Alfred Hitchcock down here, 32 movies. Anyway, it's giving me a list of, how many directors have the most, or which directors have the most movies on this list of the top 1,000 movies on IMDb. Now let's try something slightly more complicated. How about, let's do some descriptive statistics. So I'm just going to copy its ideas. Let's do some basic statistics, like mean, median, and range of the numerical columns, like runtime. Okay, let's do that. So at this point, I'm just doing basic analysis. I mean, very basic analysis, mean, median, all that stuff. In the next video, we'll talk about visualizations, because that's also a really easy thing to do with this code interpreter. Okay, so it's giving me, for runtime, the mean is about 2 hours. The median is 120 minutes, so exactly 2 hours. And the range goes from 45 minutes to, wow, 321 minutes. And I could even just ask a simple question like, which movie has a runtime of 321 minutes? I'm curious. And you can see, of course, underlying code. It's smart. It's even naming this variable longest movie. And it's a movie called Gangs of Wasseypur, a Bollywood movie or some sort of Indian movie. That is a long movie. Wow. I'll look it up later. Maybe it's a multi-part movie or something. Then we have Metascore. So this is kind of interesting. The average user rating, the mean, is 7.97, almost 8. The average critical rating from critics is significantly lower, 66. And then we have gross, how much the movie made in millions of dollars. So the average is 61.66 million. The median, though, is 10.73 million. So we have quite a few very low grossing movies on here, which we know there's a lot of zeros in there. And I think it's just inaccuracies or inconsistencies in the data set. I think a lot of the movies did not actually gross $0, but that's just what's in the CSV file. So you can see that this is already pretty useful, right? If you had real information you cared about for your company, if you run a shop, your sales data, whatever it is, I certainly have played around with this on my Udemy course, sales information, to understand trends. Plus, what we'll see next using data visualization kind of takes it to the next level. So that's enough for this video. I'll be back in the next where we continue with this data set and continue with this chat session, but we'll do some data visualization. So again, you can get pretty far without knowing what's happening behind the scenes, without understanding the code. I was able to ask pretty simple questions, like, can you calculate these basic stats? Which movie has this runtime? Which directors directed the most films on this list? I can look at the code, and if you are a developer, you can understand it, tweak it, and use it on your own machine, but you don't have to. It's doing the heavy lifting for us. Okay, so continuing with our movie data set, just a very simple data set. It makes it easy. It is, I wouldn't say dumbed down, but it's simple, it's relatively clean data, and it's easy to visualize, but that's why I'm using it. It's also, licensed, so I can use it. But what I show you here, these steps will apply for pretty much any data set. What I can do if I want some visualizations, if I have something in mind, of course, I can just ask, I want to plot a scatter plot comparing the Metacritic scores to the user scores, or an open-ended sort of statement. Let's do some data visualization. And it will suggest some options, just like it did earlier. Histogram of ratings, histogram of runtime, scatterplot of ratings versus earnings, bar chart of top 10 directors, line plot of number of movies over time, bar chart of genres. Let's do a histogram of ratings. Let's start with a histogram of the movie ratings. And we'll see the distribution of this is the user score ratings. And it's likely using matplotlib. It is. Again, not critical if you've never heard of matplotlib or you don't know how to use it. It is quite straightforward, though. This is a good way to understand how this works. If you look at the code, it's pretty straightforward. So we have things like create a histogram. You can set the color here. You can set the edge color of your histogram. You can set the title, the x-axis label, the y-axis label, and then you show the plot. But that's not the point of this video. You don't have to understand any of this. Here is our plot. So it shows a distribution of the movie ratings. So most of them, they go between mid 7s up to just a handful that are above 9.0. Most of them are in the 7.7 to 8 range, 8.2 range. And then I could do a whole bunch of things. I could ask it to, let's change the color of the histogram to, I don't know, let's do purple. Simple enough. If you're a developer, it's changing a single line right here where you set, it's not even a line, just changing, a single word right there. Instead of sky blue, you can replace that with a different color. And that's exactly what it does. Color equals purple. So it runs this code, it gets the plot, the generated plot, and then it renders it for us so that we can see it eventually. There it is, beautiful purple. And I can tweak all of these things. I could say I want to change the title of the plot. Instead of distribution of movie ratings, I won't show it to you just because it takes a little time every time I run it, but you would just ask, can we change the title to movie ratings of top 1,000 IMDb movies? You can change the actual figure size. Right now it's 10 by 6. I could make it a lot taller, a lot skinnier, so that'd be the overall diagram size. But let's move on to another plot. Why don't we do a scatter plot of rating versus gross earnings? So I'm just going to copy its suggestion here. Let's do a scatter plot of rating versus gross earnings. So user rating compared to how much a movie earned. And you'll see it's still using matplotlib. This time it's using plot.scatter, which is a different method to make a scatter plot. You provide 2 different columns of data, the rating, and then the gross, the movie's gross in millions of dollars. It's still using color of purple because it's just assumed that's what I want. It gives me some basic analysis. It basically says there's no clear correlation here. A higher rating does not guarantee higher earnings, and it looks like it did not render it, which does happen sometimes. So I'll just click regenerate, and hopefully it renders it the second time through. And here we go. Now we can see rating on our scatter plot on the x-axis and gross on the y-axis. Let's do another simple one. Let's look at the line plot of movies over time. Are most of these movies recent that are in the top 1,000 on IMDb or not? Do they include, old movies from the early days of cinema, or are they heavily weighting, things like The Dark Knight and Shawshank Redemption, things that are, I guess, they're not recent, but from the 90s and 2000s. Okay, so here we go. And it's going to give us some analysis, a general increasing trend in the number of movies released per year with some fluctuations. Here we are. So there are some early movies, but for the most part, the highest rated, this is a list of the top movies most popular on IMDb. Most of them are more recent. Certainly from the 80s onwards, if not 90s onwards. So that makes sense, right? This is all user votes that's controlling it. And I think most users who are around today, the typical, movie audience is watching movies that have been released relatively recently over movies from the 20s and 40s. And we could try asking something like, is there a correlation between the Metascore critic rating and the average user rating? And the correlation that it came up with was a value of negative 0 or 0.06, so just barely negative. A value of 0 means there's basically no correlation between the two values. A positive value means there's a correlation. Negative 1 means there's no value, or there's no correlation. Well, negative 1 would be perfect negative correlation. In this case, it's close to 0, indicating that there is no significant correlation between the Metascore and the average user rating. This suggests that a movie's critical rating, the Metascore, does not necessarily align with how users rate the movie on IMDb. And that makes sense, right? There's tons of critically acclaimed movies that users don't rate highly, and there's tons of movies that critics have panned that are very popular and have high user ratings. And I could just finish with something like, what other things can we visualize with this data set? So this is very undirected, right? I'm letting it tell me about the analysis and visualization that we can perform. Why don't we try heat map of correlations? Let's do a heat map of correlations. Oh, it's still generating, so it won't let me hit enter yet. There we go. So it's going to generate multiple plots to visualize the correlations between different numerical columns in the data set. And it's actually doing something different this time. It's using a different plotting library called Seaborn. Very popular, especially when performing this sort of analysis. Seaborn also just makes better looking plots in my opinion. So here we have a heat map of correlations. So it goes from, in this case, a little bit below 0, slightly negative, up to +1, a perfect correlation. And then we have our different columns. So runtime, you can see on this y-axis, we've got runtime and runtime down here. They correlate perfectly. That makes sense. That's going to be those bright red patches. Looking at this, there's not all that many standout correlations. This is our closest bet, or our best bet. This is runtime correlating to rating. Okay, so it's a very low value at 0.27, but it is a positive correlation value between runtime and rating. And then the same is true for Metascore and gross. So how much movie made compared to its Metascore, there's a little bit of a correlation, 0.18. Remember, +1 is a perfect correlation. Oh, and it actually does the same analysis I was just explaining. From the heat map, we can see there's no strong correlation between any two variables. The highest correlation is between rating and Metascore, around 0.29, suggesting a weak positive correlation. Anyway, that's just some exploration of the visualization capabilities, and you can go back and change the colors, the sizes, the columns that are used, the labels, do whatever you want just using plain English, right? I can just ask it, can we change the name of this plot? Can we change the background color? Can we change the scale that we use? You can do all of that, and it will update the diagram for you without you having to understand how to use matplotlib or how to use Seaborn or any of these other Python packages like pandas. So pretty cool stuff. Even though we're working with a very basic data set, it can do a lot. upload this to ChatGPT, you can see though, we've got things like the city, the state, the date, time, the country, the shape. So what was the shape of the UFO? A triangle, a saucer. How long did it appear for? Then we have latitude, and also it's hidden here, but we have longitude. It's just not shown up. So I'm interested in maybe all of this stuff, but specifically what I want to do in this video is generate a map plot. And there's a reason that I want to do a map plot. I'll show you what happens. All right, I've started up a new code interpreter chat session. I'm going to upload from my downloads not the IMDb data, the scrubbed data set for UFOs, because I just want to have the complete I don't want to have to worry about cleaning my data and having incomplete or missing data. So I'll upload this, I'll give it a message. Here's a data set of UFO sightings. And we'll wait for it to respond, asking us what we want to do with it. So it's going to start by loading it using pandas, I assume. I'll read the CSV file and then look at the head or the first few lines in that file. Yeah, that's exactly what it does. And we can see all the columns in there. We've got date, time, city, state, country, shape, duration, and then longitude, latitude, all that stuff. Okay, so it tells us here are all the different columns that we have access to. There might be missing values, hopefully not. But what I'm most interested in is latitude and longitude. Although maybe I'll start with, let's visualize UFO sightings over time. Presumably, well, I don't know if it's true, but I would assume there'd be more sightings over time, but that's what I want to see. So it's first going to step in and say, it looks like we need to clean up the date-time column. It appears to contain both date and time, which is true. It's a date-time value. So if you look at one of those values, even if you're not a developer, it includes the date followed by the time. So what it's going to do is convert the text data into a date-time object, basically so Python understands what the date and time parts are. Then, once it's done that, it can generate a time series plot. And here we go. Just like all the other plots, I could ask it to change the colors, tweak any parameter, the axes, the scale, the labels, the title, the background color, the aspect ratio of the plot itself. But this is actually kind of interesting. It looks like, there's a pretty significant increase starting in it started in the 60s, but then in the 90s, presumably, I don't know. I'm interested to see if it's around because of technology, the ease of capturing quote-unquote UFO sightings. I don't know, but there's a massive spike, and then it seems to peak somewhere in the 2015 range. Maybe it has some analysis for us. Okay, peaks around 2010 to 2013. This trend can be due to several factors: increased public interest in UFOs, advancements in technology making it easier to report and share sightings, or even cultural phenomena like popular TV shows. Anyway, it's also just a very simple analysis. It doesn't take into account population growth, increase in technology, all of that. But my real goal here is to get these on a map. I want to see where in the US, or maybe in the whole world, but probably just the US to start, these sightings are happening. Are they all in the desert by Area 51? Are they, in particular clusters? Are there areas like, I don't know, upstate New York or Washington or something where there's a bunch of UFO sightings? So I'm going to say, let's generate a map of the U.S. Do a plot of the map of the U.S. showing the locations of UFO sightings. So the first thing it has to do is limit the data set down, basically extract the locations that are within the bounds of the U.S. because it does include global sightings, and probably a lot in Canada at the very least. It just narrows down our data to the rows where the country is set to US. Okay, now that we have that, we need to create a plot. Now, this is the part I wanted to get to. It says, as the current environment doesn't support interactive geospatial libraries like GeoPandas or Folium, we will create a scatter plot on a 2D plane using matplotlib. So this kind of works. It does give us a rough geographical, you can see the shape of the US. does require a little bit of developer know-how, because even this code that it gave me is not complete. It's assuming that I already have the data imported, which we did up here. So I could probably reprompt it. Give me the entire code, including the loading of the CSV file. And let's see if that will do it for us. Okay, here we are. So it's going to import pandas. Then it reads our CSV file. Okay, that's looking good. And in the meantime, I'm going to do this in a Jupyter Notebook. Again, if you're not familiar with Python or Jupyter Notebook, then this doesn't really matter. So I'm going to make a new notebook file here. I have my CSV file right there called scrub.csv. And in here, hasn't quite finished yet, but I'll take most of this code. There we are. I'll throw it in here. I am going to need to install Folium, probably. I don't think I've installed it on this environment. Let's just see what happens when I run this. Yep, no module, Folium. So I'll just do a pip install Folium. And hopefully it doesn't take too long. Let that finish up. Okay, I'll delete that cell, rerun this one. Once again, this is not for the complete beginner. This is just showing that you can start with the code interpreter and then move out. Now I have a new file it created for me. You can see it's UFOsightings.html. And so this is one of the reasons that Folium doesn't work within that Python environment. In the code interpreter, anything that branches out of the world of Python and doesn't just simply return a little image, things like, well, Folium that generates an HTML website, that's going to be a problem. However, it did work. Let's zoom out of this. We might need to adjust some of the sensitivity here. We're just getting heat almost everywhere, although it looks like there's, gaps in pretty unpopulated areas like Wyoming. And then there's hotspots along the coast and in more populous areas. Hotspot in the desert there in, is that Nevada? No, Arizona. Sorry, I'm bad with my US states. Anyway, the point here is not to actually make some revolutionary visualization, but to show you that you can use this code interpreter as a starting point, hit the end of the line, then ask it to give you code to run on your own machine. And it will still know about those tools, it just can't use those tools in the browser like it can with Matplotlib and Pandas and Seaborn and a handful of other libraries, actually more than a handful. Why don't we just end this video by asking, what libraries do you have access to? I don't think it will give me a complete list, but it will tell me some of the most important ones that it can use. So NumPy, Pandas, Matplotlib, Seaborn, we've already seen all of those. SciPy, scikit-learn, Natural Language Toolkit, so tons of different Python libraries, although now it's starting to list some of the standard libraries too, going over the top here. But then it's saying it can't do anything involving internet access, can't make requests, can't do web scraping, it can't do things that make interactive plots. That's kind of what we just saw, Folium, Plotly, but it can help us write code using those libraries, which is what we just did. Okay. Next, I'll show another way that we can use the code interpreter. We don't have to only upload data sets, CSV files, SQL files, JSON files. We can also upload things like text files or a zip folder or an image. And then we can ask it to do certain operations depending on that type of information we provide. So I'll start by uploading an image that I've generated. Let's pick one. This is just an image I made using Midjourney. I don't know if it will let me. Yeah, I can't show it to you here. Okay, hang on. All right, here it is. It's a coral reef, basically. Nothing spectacular. I have a handful of images that I've generated that we'll do some of this later in the course. Photorealistic, sort of collage-y things, just illustrations. But whatever the image is, I'm now going to ask it to process the image. So I'll just upload it first. It will recognize that I got a PNG. And then I can do any sort of Python image processing that I could do on my own machine, which you may not be all that familiar with, but there's a lot of image libraries. I can do things like change the file format, change the resolution, change the, I could even make it black and white. Why don't I start by convert the image to a JPEG. I don't know why you would want to go from PNG to JPEG. Usually I'd prefer to go the other direction. But I just want to show you that we can do things like this. And now it provides me with a file that I can download. And then I have this JPEG on my machine. I could also try, can you make the image black and white? And you can see the code that it's doing right here. So it's converting it to black and white. I'll download it and just prove to you that it works. Here's my downloads. Here's our JPEG version. And here's the black and white version. Now, where this could be pretty useful is if you have a whole file full of stuff. Like, let's say I have 100 images, which I won't do because there is a maximum upload size, but maybe I have a folder that has 5 images. Let's just start with that. I'm going to compress this. It still only wants us to upload things as a zip file. I actually haven't tried uploading multiple things like this. Let me just see what happens. Yeah, it only wants me to upload one at a time, which is fine because I have this compressed zip file I just made, images.zip. I'm going to upload that, and then I'll say, can you unzip the contents and convert all the image files to JPEGs and make them black and white. It's only 5. It wouldn't take me that long to do it myself manually. But now we can start to automate some of these processes, whatever the right plural is, and do it all in the browser. Instead of asking it to write us code, copy the code on our machine, then run it, we just upload the files, tell it what we want, and, zip file might not, darn, contain any PNG files. Let's see. Check the contents of the unzipped directory. It unzipped it, so it looks like it's going to work. And then this creates the images folder. Inside of that, it's going to find my images. There we go. It should find them now. So it explains its work as it goes. It found the images folder, but no images. Then it tried going into the images folder, found the images. Now it's converting them all to JPEGs and making them black and white. And here are the beautiful file names that it gave me. These are some of the Midjourney file names. And we wait. It didn't actually share them with me. It just says you can view these files and converted images. Can you share me a link to download the converted images? Aha, there we go. So I just had to ask it. Let's go to my downloads. Here's converted images. Open it up. And we have JPEGs with the original, and then a JPEG black and white. So I guess I kind of asked it to do both things. I meant to do them simultaneously, which it still worked, but it did some extra stuff we didn't really need it to do. Anyway, just a simple example. But that's another type of information that we can upload, right? An image. You can upload PDFs, text files, and there are tons of libraries that it knows about. Not every Python library will be able to work, but tons of them will work, where you can get it to automate some of your workflows. So I don't know if you really need to convert PNGs to JPEGs and make them black and white all that often, but just another example of how this could be useful. Next, we'll take a look at how we can use the code interpreter to work with PDF and text documents as well. Earlier, we saw a plugin that would take a PDF and you could ask questions about it. It could, explain what was going on in the PDF. That was a third-party plugin. GPT-4 with the code interpreter can do all of that plus a whole bunch more. So I have a PDF document here of a draft of a bill in the U.S. House of Representatives, or the Senate and House of Representatives, about it's a long bill. I couldn't even tell you everything that it does, which is why I'm going to use it. But it's about creating new wilderness areas in Colorado for the most part, I believe, and protecting and creating new trails and mixed use areas. And it doesn't really matter. The point is, I'm not exactly sure. So I'm going to feed this in. I'm going to start in a new code interpreter. I'm going to upload it. It's called bill.pdf. I'm uploading it. There we go. And then it's going to ask me what I want to do with it. And I could start simple. Can you provide me with a summary of the PDF? What is the document about? And it can do this pretty quickly. If we look at the code, it basically starts by extracting the first 1,000 characters from the document. So it writes Python code using a library called PDF File Reader, called PyPDF, and then it imports this thing called PDF File Reader. It reads the first 1,000 characters and then presumably summarizes it, and it tells us more about it. The bill is titled Gunnison Outdoor Resources Protection Act. It was introduced by a senator called Bennett. It adds special management areas, conservation areas, protection areas, and so on. The bill was read twice and then referred to a committee, and it wasn't included in the first 1,000 characters. So I asked ChatGPT what else it could do with this PDF. It says it can extract the text, summarize the content, get information about a particular page, get metadata, number of pages, search for specific words or phrases. Let's try that. Give me a summary of everywhere the word bike or biking appears. Maybe I'm curious about how this bill will impact mountain biking in the PDF. Oh, we got an error. I hit regenerate, seems to be working this time. As always, we can look at the code. So it's using regular expressions. This library called RE comes with Python, and it's looking for bike or biking. And, it did not find any. Interesting. It's probably too informal of a word, bike or biking. Let me try it again. But this time, I'll use cycling, bicycle, something like that. Let's do bicycle or cyclists. Let's try that. The words bicycle or cyclist appear in the PDF. And I think that should work. I assume this recreational area bill mentions cyclists somewhere. We'll see what we get. Okay, good. The use of off-highway vehicles and bicycles shall be permitted only on roads, trails, blah, blah, blah. The Secretary may permit the use of bicycles. The use of off-highway vehicles and bicycles shall be permitted only on roads. So it's working. Anytime it finds bicycles, I don't know if there's any cyclists mentioned in here or not, but it's going through the entire PDF and finding information. Finally, let's end with, let's just ask it to extract the text into a text file instead of a PDF. That makes it easier to work with later on if I have other code. Can you extract the full text and save it into a text file? I'll say txt file called bill.txt. Great. Hopefully that works. Here's our code. It's reading the file, so it's opening it. In write mode, it extracts it and then saves it into a new file called bill.txt. Let's download it and take a look. And here is the bill.txt file. Looks good to me, although it does include all of those annoying line numbers, right, that you can see here. So let's get even fancier and tell it to ignore line numbers if it can. Can you extract the full text and save into a file called bill.txt, but please do not include any of the line numbers in the saved output. That will make it easier to work with because, if we look at this, it's the accurate text, but it's so disjointed with all these line numbers in there. Remove the line numbers, saved it into bill without line numbers.txt. Let's download that and take a look. Perfect. It's working exactly as I intended. So with these sort of tasks, it can be really useful, especially if you're not a developer. But even if you are, this wouldn't be that difficult to do with some basic Python, but why bother? Especially if you have a bunch of files. You want to remove the line numbers and do something with a bunch of government bills for some reason. You can feed them all in as PDFs, turn them into text, extract the line numbers or remove the line numbers, and then perform some analysis or ask it to summarize or whatever you want to do with it. So just a simple example, but another interesting use case and a different type of data that we can upload. It doesn't have to be just a CSV file or a JSON data set. You can upload images, you can upload PDFs and text files, and we'll play around with video in the next video. All right, so next I want to show how we can do some basic video manipulation using the code interpreter with GPT-4. So I have Now I have a code interpreter session going, and I have a folder just of my own videos that I've made actually for this course, just some short videos. And this is just acting as sort of a placeholder demo, but I'm going to ask it to do some basic video manipulation. But the first thing I have to do is actually zip my video folder, because I only want a single upload. Make sure it's under 500 megabytes, which is a significant restriction if I was trying to do something big. For example, one of the things I had to do recently was go and rename like 500 video files for one of my old courses. The numbering system got messed up and I needed to rename them. I wrote a basic script myself to do it, but it would be nice to use the interpreter to do it, except the video files are how much? It was multiple gigabytes of videos, like almost 100. So that wouldn't work to upload. But I just asked ChatGPT to write me a script, and then I used the script and tweaked it myself. So it all worked out fine. So I'm going to upload my videos.zip, and I'm going to ask it or tell it, this is a zip folder containing videos. What do I want it to do? I think it'd be cool. I could ask it to trim the videos or add on a little intro video to each one. That might be fancy, like a little, I don't have an intro right now, but that could be useful. Or maybe I'd like you to create me a new video containing 2-second clips from the original videos included in the folder. So I don't know if this would truly be useful in this case, but I just want to show that it can do video manipulation. So I'm going to give it this folder of videos. I want it to unzip it and then take 2 seconds of video from each one of them and combine those 2 seconds to make a 10-second video. All right, so that finished up. The upload did. Now I'm going to submit it and see what it says. It's going to unzip the file, identify the videos, extract 2-second clips, combine the clips into one video. Let's see, the first step is unzipping it. Then it's trying to get a list of the video files. Same thing as last time when I provided a zip folder, it wasn't expecting there to be a folder inside, which it's because of the way I zip them together. I put them in a folder first and then zip the whole folder. So I'll just tell it there's a folder inside the zip folder. Let's see if that's enough information. And hopefully it will, there we go, it found the videos. So again, it's just the folder structure I provided. I probably would have been better off, I definitely would have, if I just selected all the files and then zipped them together instead of putting them in a folder first. Now it's asking me, do you want to extract the first 2 seconds or a specific timestamp? Let's just do the first 2 seconds. It's not something that's actually useful, but I just want to show some of its capabilities here to do some basic video processing. And then we can see the code that it's using. So it's using a library called MoviePy, and then it's going through each of the videos from 0 to 2, the start time and end time, and it's extracting that information and then creating this list of clips, and then eventually writing that video to a new file. Okay, so it saved them separately as a bunch of small clips. You can see clip has been added to the name of each file. Now it's going to combine them all. Just use the existing order. It's asking me what order I want them to be combined into, and I'll just say the order that they were defined in. I don't really care, although it is 4, 5, 2, 3, 1, whatever. That's okay. And here's our code where it is creating a new clip file by concatenating all the different files together from that one folder. And now I can download the final video. Hopefully. Here we go. Here it is. First 2 seconds of one video. Next 2 seconds, another 2 seconds, another 2 seconds. They all kind of look the same, but you can tell there's different clips in there by my slides. All right,